Whoop. Hello, everyone. We are live, or I am live, of course. Still waiting for YouTube to catch up. And this is the theme every week now, seeing how long it'll take for YouTube to catch up. In the meantime, I will jump into the chat and see who's here. We have Nomad 0036. We have Squid Monkey, Gamma Goblin Miller, Michael Tomlinson, Politically Confused Squirrel, Carolina Infidel, Robert Graham, Cap'n Mac, Blue River Cat, Leonidas Alberia, Shadow Bear, Q is in Squid Monkey BS in California, P. Taylor, Uncle Mike, James California is in the house, Michael J. Let's see, Ranger Smith, Sean Marolf, Talisman, we have Tada, Frank. I always think it's funny when people just have like a first name and nothing else. Tim Allen is also in the house. We have Trashman. Oh, I guess YouTube would not allow his intro today, so I'll have to check my email in a second. We have Gregory M. Casey, P. Taylor, Douglas from Pennsylvania, Gary Bergman, Frosty Leprechaun, Don Simmons, Tim Dasinger, Ginger Monkey Bear, Kelly Karshner, Chavez Head, Jesse Sowell, Lance Kilkenny, Tristan Goodrich, let's see, John Deal, Leo P30SK, Jay the Magic Robot, Dragon DJ, Michael C, Stuart Elzeth says, "Hey, Miss Mom." Hello. Spirit of Oi. Ooh, I like that one. Lou Flores, Michael Clark, G Keyman 565, Russell. Let's see. And we have a super chat in from Joe Marisaw, who obviously is here if he's super chatting. Says, with COVID vaccines being required and people fleeing New York, how long before I Am Legend becomes a reality? I mean, how long before humans fight back the vegetation growth or the vampire zombie things? That is an excellent question. It's really strange. There's so many surreal things happening in the world. I mean, there has been surreal things happening in the world for quite some time, but it's gotten way worse since COVID. And we'll be talking about the Tucker Carlson thing today. And that's dystopian in and of itself. But especially like since COVID, it's really creepy, some of the things that have been happening in the world. You know, we have this whole thing now where like the Democrats are saying that it's the Republicans that wanted to defund the police. And so it's the Republicans' fault that there are these huge crime increases. And that feels very much like, you know, going back and rewriting the history books and changing the history books, like in, wasn't it 1984, where they did that? Always changing the history books to change the narrative and change the public's opinion of things for governmental gain. Lots of crazy stuff happening. And of course, Joe Biden said he wanted his administration to be going community to community, neighborhood to neighborhood, and door to door, as he put it in the, you can check it out in the Liberty Minute video that I posted earlier today. And he's gotten some pushback over that. And interestingly, Jen Psaki had one of her little press conferences where she circled back and was kind of like, oh, well, you know, it's not a bad thing and it's not illegal and it's not a breach of privacy because like we wouldn't have federal employees be doing that. We'd have volunteers going out and doing that and going door to door. And that's how they're trying to spin it so that it's not some breach of privacy, medical privacy, freedom, rights, civil rights, whatever, by the government. And she's like, oh, well, it would be volunteers and clergy, so that makes it okay. Like, oh, man. All kinds of crazy things happening in the world. So let me check Patreon here to get that Oh, it's going to make me, this is so stupid. It's going to make me log in again and go through everything to accept the device. So instead, we'll go through email. So Trashman says, live from the storm cleanup state, it's the lady who doesn't confiscate Lego, have any sympathy for creepy porn lawyers going to jail, nor is she surprised that the NSA is spying on conservatives yet again. And with that, here's Dolly. It's funny you say that it's the storm cleanup state. I don't know how the rest of the state fared, but here we were supposed to have rain for 2 days, and instead we got rain for approximately 2 hours. So not much of that big hurricane here, though I hear that New York is underwater right now, and they are blaming climate change. And AOC got on Twitter and basically said, oh, well, if it weren't for climate change, this wouldn't be happening. And if we had the Green New Deal, this wouldn't be happening. I'm pretty sure that every time New York gets hit by a major hurricane, it floods, right? Am I the only one that remembers this happening frequently over the past however many number of years? I'm pretty sure it's a thing every time there's a big storm that comes through. And the irony of it, too, is she was blaming the federal government for stuff that was happening in New York that was actually governed by state policies and the state government. But, you know... all right, guys. Oh, and we have some super chats in. So let me grab these before I dive in. I just lost it. Here we go. Sean Morolf says, did you see the article on how the vaccines cause heart inflammation in preteens and young teens? I did not see a specific article recently, but it has been something that's been documented for a while. I covered it in a couple Liberty Minute videos. It was a connection or side effect that was first noticed by researchers in Israel, if I remember correctly. And then there ended up being reports here in the US, and the CDC was supposed to have an emergency meeting about it in June to go over the research and go over the claims and decide whether they thought or not that there was a causal relationship. But that was the same week that Biden signed into law or whatever, declared that Juneteenth, was a federal holiday. And their meeting was supposed to be on that Friday that Juneteenth was going to be observed. And so that meeting got canceled and got rescheduled, even though it was an emergency meeting. And then in the end, I believe they said that there was no connection. I've also seen some infographics going around Facebook about the number of adverse effects and adverse reactions listed in the VAERS database and pointing out how many it is, and Facebook is fact-checking it and saying, oh, well, it's incomplete information or it's misleading information, because just because something is entered into the database doesn't mean that the vaccines actually caused it, and so we can't actually use that data for the frequency of side effects from the vaccine or anything like that. But there was also a press conference a couple weeks ago that a representative, I believe it was a representative, held, where he had several families at this press conference testifying about some side effects that they had from the COVID vaccine. And one of them was this sad 13-year-old girl. She was 12 at the time that she had volunteered for the clinical trials. This mom got up there with this kid, and I believe she said all three of her children were like 15 and under and volunteered for these clinical trials. And she was like, well, they want to do it, so I'm going to let them do it. And this poor girl was like this happy, healthy, active, athletic girl before getting the COVID vaccine. And then she got her second shot and ended up having to go to the hospital emergency room. I believe it was 3 different times for these crazy circulatory and neurological side effects that she was having from the vaccine. And now she is wheelchair bound with a feeding tube. And that was in the press conference. And I don't remember the little girl's first name. Her last name is DeGary. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, but it's like DE space GARAY, if I remember correctly. Actually, I can probably look it up real quick. Yep, here we go. I will put that in the chat for you guys. An article about it. Stephanie DeGary was the mom, and her daughter's name, Maddie DeGary. And apparently they also went on Tucker Carlson afterwards. But yes, there was a big press conference. I'm sorry, it was Senator Ron Johnson from Wisconsin, I believe, was the one that had the little press conference on June 28th. And it included stories and testimony from 5 different families. And he has sent letters to the CEOs of Pfizer and Moderna seeking answers about some of the adverse reactions, and has just been ignored, basically. So, no, I have not seen a recent article about it, but I mean, that's something that's been noted for at least a month, probably 2 at this point. Politically confused squirrel says, just sending some baby bucks your way, may have to bounce out, but we'll catch the show later as always. Thanks for all you do. Thank you. I appreciate that. And thank you for thanking me, because this week has been a tough week. The video that I got out today, I wrote Tuesday, and I was originally going to try to get out Wednesday, but this week has been a week full of doctor's appointments and client drama and a bunch of exhaustion, actually. I had my primary care physical, and apparently I have some pregnancy-induced vitamin and nutrient deficiencies, and that might be contributing to why I'm so exhausted, but I couldn't get another appointment for 2 weeks, so we'll have to wait and see how that goes. Anyways, there was another super chat that came in. Q says a quick congrats to Nico and Shane. Yeah, they are the HAPA Supremacy folks over on Twitter, and they also have a show on YouTube. And they've been documenting their journey with IVF and their fertility issues. And I guess there was some sort of emergency, and they had to have an emergency C-section a couple days ago. But as far as I know, baby boy is born happy and healthy for them. So that is super exciting. And Acyclone Steve says, so you're saying I shouldn't get a weekly booster. So Pfizer is right now trying to get FDA approval for a 3rd COVID shot, a booster shot. And right now the FDA and CDC is saying that it's not necessary. But that, of course, could change. All right. And Leonidas says there's a total of 4 variants said together. They sound like the name of a college fraternity. Yeah, I know. And yes, I am taking prenatal vitamins. I've been taking prenatal vitamins even before I was pregnant. I am taking all of the vitamins. Trust me. I had to get a pill container, and I fill it every Saturday night or Sunday morning. Trust me, I'm taking all of the vitamins. I'm eating all of the things. Anyways, what was I saying? Yes, 4 variants. The big one right now that everyone is talking about is the Delta variant, but now there's articles about a Lambda variant. I don't know. And Bruce the Boss Resurrected says, YouTube nuked me for criticism of World Health Organization masking the jabbed, but I had to come back for you. Thank you. I was like, Bruce the Boss Resurrected. I was like, that sounds like Bruce the Boss Brooks. Oh, goodness. All right. So we are going to talk about the Tucker Carlson story and the way that this has evolved over the last week or so. But before I get into it, I guess in honor of this story that we have with Tucker Carlson and the NSA and being unmasked and all of this, I will take this as the opportunity to plug one of the partners of this channel, which is ExpressVPN. I'll put their link down in the chat. They are also down in the description of every video. For those of you that don't know, a VPN, virtual private network, basically it helps to keep everything that you do online private and secure and encrypted. It is unlikely to stop the NSA because it's the NSA. It might take them a little bit longer. It might discourage them a little bit. It's not going to completely protect you from the NSA because it's the government. But it can help protect you against hackers and other prying eyes. It's really simple. You install the VPN, you press a button, and you can pick to have a server in the US. You can pick to make it look like you're coming from France or Spain or China. I don't really know why you would want to do that, but you could. And with ExpressVPN, you don't have to worry about it affecting your internet speeds. You can still use Tor and do torrenting, peer-to-peer, whatever, all that stuff that you're not supposed to be doing. And it also, you can whitelist sites. So, for example, my VPN, with the VPN, I used to have a different one. I have since switched because the different one, I used to have NordVPN, and actually they ended the partnership with my channel because they said that they no longer partnered with people that had political speech. But ironically, Jessica Yaniv posts about them all over Twitter and her partnership, partnership with them. If you don't know who Jessica Yaniv is, bless your heart, you are lucky. Anyways, so I sought out ExpressVPN after that. And with my old VPN, I used to, when I had to do my insurance billing for my clients, actually the websites wouldn't work because were blocked because of the VPN. With ExpressVPN, that's not an actual issue. You can whitelist websites and all this other stuff. Anyways, if you use my link, you will get free 3 months free off of an annual subscription. And I do recommend a VPN for everyone. All right. So are you guys ready to talk about Tucker Carlson? This story, when I first heard it, I was like, oh man, that's pretty shady, but I guess it is what it is. But it has really escalated a lot over the last few days in a way that I found to be kind of, I don't want to say that it's shocking because it shouldn't be shocking, but it's getting to be pretty ridiculous. So the original story is Tucker Carlson went on air late June, I believe it was, and said that the NSA was reading his private emails and that he believed the NSA was planning to leak the contents of his emails in order to try to get his show off the air. So this was actually only published a day ago through Fox News, but it's a piece written by Tucker Carlson himself. So he says, last week, we told you that the Biden administration's largest intelligence gathering agency, the NSA, had been reading my private emails, even noting that out loud is weird. It's one of those segments we never thought we would do ever. But the country has changed that much that fast. And honestly, the whole thing was kind of shocking. The government was spying on us? Come on. It seemed crazy, but it's true. And no one in Washington appeared to be shocked in the slightest. In fact, the usual shills right after our segment had a ready explanation for it. Either it never happened at all, they said, just a cable news show lying for ratings, or there must have been a good reason that it happened. And they began furiously making excuses for the NSA, a powerful, heavily politicized spy agency surveilling journalists who've been critical of the regime. No problem. It's perfectly normal. Just don't call it spying. And actually, I don't know if this is a link. No, they don't have, or maybe they do. So here is, yes, June 29th. So here is the original article. And he does make a very good point when he says that people in the media already had ready explanations. One of those, I believe it was Chris Hayes, I believe it was on CNN, actually took clips of Tucker Carlson's show and him talking about being spied on by the NSA and said that Tucker Carlson is the new Alex Jones and that he's that much of a conspiracy theorist, and to even think that the NSA could possibly be spying on him was either an attempt to get better ratings, which is silly because Tucker Carlson gets better ratings than everything at CNN and NBC and MSNBC. But also to compare him to Alex Jones is a huge attempt at discrediting him. And I mean, it's really not that far-fetched to believe that the NSA could be spying on journalists. The NSA has been caught spying on journalists before. We found out through Edward Snowden that the NSA basically watches all Americans all of the time. So, sup, NSA agent. So this is a transcript from the original show on June 29th. He said it's not just political protesters the government is spying on. Yesterday, we heard from a whistleblower within the U.S. government who reached out to warn us that the NSA, the National Security Agency, is monitoring our electronic communications and is planning to leak them in an attempt to take this show off the air. Now, that's a shocking claim and ordinarily would be skeptical of it. It's illegal for the NSA to spy on American citizens. It's a crime. It's not a third world country. Things like that should not happen in America, but unfortunately, they do happen, and in this case, they did happen. The whistleblower, who is in a position to know, repeated back to us information about a story that we were working on that could have only come directly from my texts and emails. There's no other possible source for that information, period. The NSA captured that information without our knowledge and did it for political reasons. The Biden administration is spying on us. We have confirmed that. This morning, we filed a FOIA request, a Freedom of Information Act request, asking for all information that the NSA and other agencies have gathered about this show. We did it mostly as a formality. We've also contacted the press office at both the NSA and the FBI. We don't expect to hear much back. That's the way that usually goes. And like I said, of course, a lot of the other news outlets immediately jumped on this and called Tucker Carlson crazy, conspiracy theorist, the next Alex Jones, blah, 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 blah. We have this article that, for some reason, the New York Post is putting a picture of a cat on. Also on the 29th, that Tucker Carlson claims the NSA is spying on him. Says, again, Fox News host Tucker Carlson is accusing the Biden administration of surveilling his private communications in an effort to get his show yanked from the air. Now, I will say that before the rest of this story came out, I had no trouble believing that the NSA would be watching Tucker Carlson. I don't know if I would necessarily say, like, oh, the only reason they could have behind it would be to take his show off of the air, but it's entirely possible. If that is the reasoning that ends up, I don't want to say ends up coming out because we'll never know, but if that were in fact the reasoning behind it, that would be even more serious because then we know that the NSA is being politically motivated to, I don't know, get rid of Biden's detractors. Of course, it would not be the first time that the government has acted politically when it shouldn't. The first big one that comes to mind, obviously, is Obama's IRS and how they were targeting Republican organizations and nonprofits and trying to yank their nonprofit status, blah, 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 blah. So it would not be the first time that a government alphabet agency targeted the administration's opponents or political opposites, right? So this details, again, the accusations and how he said that he was filing the FOIA requests. NSA did not immediately respond to the Post request for comment, nor did the White House. Asked about Carlson's claims while speaking to reporters aboard Air Force One on Tuesday morning, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki acknowledged that surveillance was something the NSA conducted as part of its work, but couldn't speak to his case. Well, the NSA is an entity that focuses on foreign threats and individuals who are trying to attempt to do us harm on foreign soil, Psaki said. So that is their purview. But beyond that, I would point you to the intelligence community. And oddly enough, the NSA actually did respond, sort of. They wrote a non-denial denial where basically they said they did not deny at all that they had uncovered or seen or spied on any of Tucker Carlson's communications. They simply denied him being a direct target of the NSA and denied wanting to take his show off of the air. So the only two things that they denied were targeting him expressly and trying to take his show off the air. They did not actually deny spying on his communications. You see? And what we saw with Michael Flynn, for example, was there are times where the NSA might be spying on a foreign adversary, a foreign power like Putin, for example, other world leaders, and American communications get swept up in that, right? And that is this weird backdoor way that they have of spying on Americans. They say, oh, well, this person was communicating with a foreign power or a foreign agent, or this person was communicating with that person who was communicating with that person who was communicating with a foreign agent. That's how, like I said, Michael Flynn got swept up in all of this. The other big thing is, if you remember the Michael Flynn case, the fact that people even knew it was Michael Flynn was a pretty big deal. There is a big unmasking procedure that is supposed to happen when these kinds of communications are stumbled upon, we'll say. So when they find these communications of Americans, whoever, with foreign agents, the names of the Americans are supposed to be kept private. To unmask them, there is supposed to be basically like a court process where they make a case to a judge to unmask. And they're like, we absolutely need to know who this other person is for whatever reason. It's a national security emergency. And the judge says, oh, okay. It's the secret FISA courts, right? So that means that for a whistleblower to approach Carlson and say that the NSA has your communications, that means that he was unmasked and that someone somewhere had to make a case for a judge saying that the NSA or whatever government agency, because they're saying it wasn't the NSA, they were saying to this judge that the NSA absolutely had to know who this person was because it was a matter of national security, and a judge somewhere granted it, if they went through the actual legal channels, which of course is questionable. So remember, this story came out on the 29th. Tucker Carlson talked about it on his show. All the other news networks said that he was crazy, called him Alex Jones, said that he was the next big conspiracy theorist, all these things to try to discount him, blah, 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 blah. Then we have this on July 7th. So a full week later, this comes out on Axios. Scoop: Tucker Carlson sought Putin interview at time of spying claim. And this is from Jonathan Swan. So Jonathan writes, Tucker Carlson was talking to US-based Kremlin intermediaries about setting up an interview with Vladimir Putin shortly before the Fox News host accused the National Security Agency of spying on him, sources familiar with the conversations tell Axios. Now, an important thing to note right away here within this first little paragraph, sources familiar with the conversations tell Axios. According to Tucker Carlson, the only people, on his end at least, that knew about this were him and his executive producer. That is it. No one else knew that he was trying to get an interview with Putin. Number two, it's not that unusual for a journalist to do their job and try to get an interview with someone who leads a foreign country or is a big name in the current political sphere. That is not unusual. Certainly, it could possibly be that someone in this chain of, US-based Kremlin intermediaries leaked this somehow, but as we get to the rest of the article, seems really unlikely. So they say the sources, why it matters is because those sources said U.S. government officials learned about Carlson's efforts to secure the Putin interview. Carlson learned the government was aware of his outreach, and that's the basis of his extraordinary accusation, followed by a rare public denial by the NSA that he had been targeted. So right there, the idea that it was someone on the Kremlin side that whistle blew this and leaked this and unmasked Tucker is really unlikely, because it says right here, those sources said U.S. government officials learned about his efforts to get the Putin interview and that he learned that the government was aware of his outreach. So later on, Swan, he never names his sources and he tries to kind of like hide who they are in this. But right there's two things that say government officials and government. And here is actually the link to the NSA's denial, as we'll call it. And this is their quote-unquote denial. On June 28th, 2021, Tucker Carlson alleged that the National Security Agency has been monitoring our electronic communications and is planning to leak them in an attempt to take this show off the air. This allegation is untrue. Tucker Carlson has never been an intelligence target of the agency, and the NSA has never had any plans to take his program off the air. So see, that's what I said, where they didn't deny monitoring the electronic communications or getting any of those communications. They're only denying that he was a target of the agency and that they had plans to take his program off the air. That's it. And then they say the NSA has a foreign intelligence mission. We target foreign powers to generate insights on foreign activities that could harm the United States, with limited exceptions. For example, in emergency, NSA may not target a U.S. citizen without a court order that explicitly authorizes the targeting. But remember, he's been unmasked, so there was some kind of, case made about an emergency or something to unmask him, or, someone just did a no-no and wasn't doing their job. And then Axios points out that they have not confirmed whether any communications from Carlson have been intercepted, and if so, why. But also, the U.S. government officials learned about his efforts that supposedly no one else knew about except for Tucker Carlson and his executive producer. If none of his communications were intercepted, how did the government know? How did they find out? It's a good question. The big picture, they say, is that Carlson's charges instantly became a cause célèbre on the right, which feasted on the allegation that one of America's most prominent conservatives might have been monitored by the U.S. intelligence community. And they say the backstory is that he told roughly 3 million viewers, blah, blah, blah. Said that his source was someone who was in a position to know, repeated back the information from the story that they were working on. And the next night, NSA did their non-denial denial. In response, a Fox News spokesperson said, "We support any of our hosts pursuing interviews and stories free of government interference." And Carlson gave an additional statement, "As I've said repeatedly, because it's true, the NSA read my emails and then leaked their contents. That's an outrage as well as illegal." And Axios goes on to say, it's unclear why Carlson or his source would think this outreach could be the basis for NSA surveillance or a motive to have his show canceled. Now, I see that's that part I sort of agree with, where, I mean, we don't know that they would have used that information to try and get his show canceled. But you know, after all of the Trump Russia that we had from 2016 on, suffice it to say, if there was some kind of leak to whoever that, Tucker Carlson was communicating with Kremlin-based people, well, that fits right into the narrative of, all these conservatives are Russian plants. All of these conservatives are colluding with Russia. Like, it fits right into the leftist narrative that we have had going on 5 years now. Yes, as Axios says here, journalists do routinely reach out to world leaders, so it really shouldn't be that much of a crazy thing if Tucker Carlson was reaching out to the Kremlin and Putin to try to secure an interview, but that doesn't matter in the eyes of a lot of the folks at like CNN, MSNBC, Rachel Maddow, all of these people and personalities, because all they have to do is get on their little TV show and say something, and then all of their viewers parrot it back all over social media and to all their friends and all their families without ever pausing to think critically about it and analyze whether it's true, what circumstances that event could have happened under, etc. So I don't think it would have mattered. The other possibility is that there's actually something way worse, as, trying to get an interview with a foreign power isn't bad when you're a journalist. But it could be that they have some crazy dirt on him, and Tucker Carlson was like, well, let me come out and just flat out say that it's the NSA and they've been watching us, because now if anything does get leaked, it will confirm that the NSA was watching him. So, the meme about the 4D chess, Tucker Carlson was playing some 4D chess here, clearly. And I think that whatever it is that could have transpired, he definitely got out ahead of it to try and get the heat off a little bit, I suppose. But it even says here that Chris Wallace even got an Emmy nomination for interviewing Putin in 2018. But Chris Wallace, even though he's on Fox News, he's like a moderate at best. And So at that point, it probably wasn't like, ooh, he's colluding with Russia. He's a Russian plant. On Wednesday, Carlson told Maria Bartiromo on Fox Business that only his executive producer knew about the communications in question and that he didn't mention it to anybody else, including his wife. But then it says, of course, the recipients of Carlson's texts and emails also knew about their content, and we don't know how widely they shared this information. It's true, but still, government officials learned of it, said right in the second paragraph. Axios does point out that the NSA's public statement didn't directly deny that any of his communications had been swept up by the agency. Axios submitted a request for comment to the NSA on Wednesday, and they basically just referred back to the statement that they had made on Twitter. And they note that it was a carefully worded statement that was put out on Twitter. In other words, the NSA is denying the targeting of Carlson, but is not denying that his communications were incidentally collected. So they're saying that there are several plausible scenarios as to where this goes next. So they're saying one scenario is that the U.S. government submitted a request to the FISA courts to monitor Carlson to protect national security, but that's not plausible. They say that it could have been that, in fact, one of the people he was talking to as an intermediary to get him the interview was under surveillance as a foreign agent. That is most likely what happened. In this scenario, Carlson's emails or text messages could have been incidentally collected as part of monitoring this person, but his identity would have been masked in any intelligence reports. So if that is the case, how did a whistleblower know to approach him? Later on, it came out that he was approached at a funeral, supposedly, with this information. So how did someone even know to approach him then and there and be like, oh yes, you were the subject of these emails and communications that were swept up? Axios even says, in order to know that the texts and emails were Carlson's, a U.S. government official would likely have to request his identity be unmasked, something that's only permitted if the unmasking is necessary to understand the intelligence. And they're saying, well, the third possibility is that none of his communications were picked up at all, but they were monitoring Putin and somehow found out about it. But again, his identity would have been masked and would have had to be unmasked. Two sources familiar with Carlson's communications said his two Kremlin intermediaries live in the United States, but these sources could not confirm whether both are American citizens or whether both were on U.S. soil at the time they communicated with Carlson. This is relevant because if one of them was a foreign national and on foreign soil during the communications, the U.S. government wouldn't necessarily have had to seek approval to monitor their communications. If this source is not involved with the government, even though the first and second paragraph of this article suggests they are, how would they even know who the Kremlin intermediaries are and where they live? So all of it is kind of shady. And then we have this article that also just came out, and this is from Glenn Greenwald, originally of The Intercept, which he has now left over censorship and wokeism, which is funny because he founded The Intercept. You might remember Glenn Greenwald. I believe he is the one that exploded and brought all of us the Edward Snowden NSA story. So this is from him. Journalist says the U.S. national security apparatus has been operating in secret without accountability for 8 or 9 decades. Investigative journalist Glenn Greenwald reacted to claims by Fox News host Tucker Carlson that the NSA wrongfully identified him through communications intended to set up an interview with Russian President Putin Wednesday on Tucker Carlson Tonight. On Wednesday, Carlson alluded to an Axios report that laid out such allegations about the NSA. By the way, I can't find it now, but 2 hours after the Axios article broke, Gizmodo wrote an article also talking about how crazy Tucker Carlson was and called him like a pompadour, like Play-Doh face or something, and was like, oh, he's so crazy. There's no proof of this. He's just a conspiracy theorist doing it for ratings. And that was after the Axios article broke out. So clearly at Gizmodo, they're not doing their homework. Anyways. So goes on to say the only people that knew about the communications, past people who have interviewed Putin, and if NSA captures information sent privately by the American citizen, they have to keep that citizen's identity secret unless they go through a process to unmask it, Carlson told Greenwald on Wednesday. It seems very clear they did exactly what they are not allowed to do. Greenwald replied that there are two important components to the case. One, the likelihood that Carlson's communications had been intercepted with legal authority because he was communicating with either the Russian government or a target in the United States who he was using as an intermediary. If they learned, this is according to Greenwald, that way that you were communicating with the Russians about the possibility of an interview with Putin, they have the legal obligation to conceal your identity and make sure that nobody knows that you were the one that was speaking to the Russians. The intelligence that the NSA cares about is that the Russians were doing something, not with whom they were speaking. So clearly there was either a failure to hide your identity as required by law, which is illegal, or an attempt to unmask it after it was minimized. Then he went on to say they've been operating in secret and with no democratic accountability for 8 or 9 decades, adding that President Eisenhower, upon leaving office in 1961, warned of the pitfalls posed by the national security state. He says the remedy is for Congress to do something about it and to exercise oversight. Realistically, I don't think that's ever going to happen. There have been plenty of opportunities for Congress to do this, and they have not taken up those opportunities at all and have, in fact, squandered them pretty much every time. So I don't think that we're going to see that at all with Congress doing anything about it. And especially right now with there being so many Democrats in Congress, there have been, how do I put it? Requests would be too lightly. There have been plenty of Democrats in the political sphere and in legacy media talking about how Fox News needs to get shut down and Tucker Carlson needs to get shut down because all they ever do is spread misinformation and they are too biased of a media news source, which is ironic. With all of that going on and him being the target, so-called target that's bringing all of this to light, I don't see Congress doing much of anything at all. And then we have the actual text should be here of the FOIA request that he sent to find out what exactly the NSA knows and what communications they had. So this is the FOIA request form that was sent over. Says, I am requesting any call records, texts, or emails the NSA has obtained from journalist Tucker Carlson's cell phone or email. I'm requesting any memos or documents related to surveilling journalist Tucker Carlson. I'm requesting any communication between NSA officials regarding journalist Tucker Carlson. And the case is currently in hold status, and they're awaiting for coordination before taking more action. So that's all that we have on this. So obviously, this FOIA request is out if it's being printed by the Washington Examiner here. And interestingly enough, when I put this into DuckDuckGo to pull up the FOIA request and get more information about the FOIA request. We have this article from Yahoo News via the Daily Beast. Oh, Tucker Carlson's extremely mad that journalists FOIA'd his FOIA request to the NSA. Like, what is even the point of this article? Oh, he's mad that they FOIA'd his FOIA. Like, really? Okay. So according to the Daily Beast, reposted by Yahoo, Tucker Carlson angrily lashed out on Thursday night over the fact that journalists filed a Freedom of Information Act request on his FOIA request to the NSA, calling one reporter who has a lengthy history of exposing the intelligence community's abuses a stooge. And then they just detail, the rest of the story, the background of the story in a very hyper-leftist Daily Beast way. And that's the whole article. That's it. They say that BuzzFeed posted the FOIA request. The Intercept posted the FOIA request. And that's it. That's basically the whole article. Is all of the background and how he is supposedly so mad that other journalists are getting up in his business and FOIA-ing the FOIA. Much wow. So, in the end, the media, of course, is not on his side. This was one of the original articles from CNN after after the first allegations came out by Oliver Darcy over at CNN Business. Tucker Carlson claimed the NSA is spying on him, and even his own colleagues don't seem to believe it. Carlson's own colleagues don't appear to be buying what he's selling. Because, barring an unusual circumstance, blah, 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 it would never happen. The government wouldn't do it. It's not a story of significant consequence. When the Washington Post, CNN, and the New York Times recently learned that the Trump Justice Department had seized the records of its reporters, the revelation led to weeks of coverage and a commitment from the Biden administration to end such practices, which is a really good point. We're not seeing this with this story at all. Carlson not only alleged that the NSA was spying on him, but that it was conspiring to take him off of the air and engaging in the conduct for political reasons. But the morning after Carlson delivered his bombshell claim, none of his colleagues covered it. So you have to wonder, is it really because they just don't believe him, or is it politically motivated on their side because it's a conservative and not, oh, orange man bad, orange man targeting journalists? They're like, oh, it didn't even get coverage on Fox and Friends over on Fox News, blah, 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 blah. And another, a whole article from Oliver Darcy over at CNN about how, even Fox News doesn't believe Tucker Carlson, and even they think that it's fake. Well, clearly, at this point, it's not fake. It's going to be interesting to see how the rest of this story plays out and what other information we get as this goes on. If they, they kind of have to respond to the FOIA, but they could just dilly-dally forever and never give out that information. If they do give it out, it's going to be really interesting to see what got caught up in this and what got swept up in it. But I do think, so if it was something... Tucker Carlson thought that there was something way worse that had happened or way worse information that they had somehow, and now he's doing this FOIA. I think that would be kind of shooting himself in the foot, because then someone would get a hold of that information, right? And then whatever information he didn't want to come out would come out. So that does lead me to believe that it is tied to Putin and trying to get this interview. And again, remember, this is current events. This wasn't even trying to get an interview with Putin during, the Trump administration or anything. All of this is happening real time. This is a story that is breaking and coming out real time. So in the end, we're going to see if all of these journalists that railed against the government targeting journalists and unmasking journalists and all of this, we're going to see if they're going to put their money where their mouth is and then actually report on this Tucker Carlson story and condemn the NSA and the surveillance state over that. Frankly, unfortunately, I highly doubt it, because at this point, politics have become way too polarized, and I mean, it would take some severe swallowing of pride, I think, for folks at like CNN and NBC to go back and actually report on this in an honest way and say like, wow, this is something that shouldn't be happening, because it's their political rival. I don't think they're going to do it, because we have not seen journalistic integrity from the legacy media as a whole in a very, very long time. So, all of that being said, Andrew Kang says the salt must flow. So I'm going to jump in and check out these super chats here, because I am sure there are some. I was on a roll, so I didn't want to pause to check them, because I'm probably going to take that segment and pop it on the channel tomorrow or the next day as a separate video. So, let's see. A Cyclone Steve says, is there a double secret probation variant? Not that I know of. Jesse Sowell, thank you for the super sticker. Steve Pat asks, have you noticed if taking extra supplements has helped you on any other fronts? My wife took extra magnesium during her pregnancy, and a lucky side effect was it stopped all of her migraines. Hope you and Nugget are well. So I actually am also someone that has migraines. I haven't had one. I don't have wood to knock on. Actually, no, my dice box is wood. I haven't had one in a little over a month, and I usually get 2 a month. I have not really been taking extra magnesium because I am really, really sensitive to magnesium supplements. I used to have a calcium supplement that had magnesium in it, and my belly did not like it. But what I have been drinking, and actually what's in this cup right now, is this like electrolyte drink called Body Armor. And it has magnesium in it and a whole bunch of other things. It's got folate and vitamin C and all of these things in it. And incidentally, funny story, women who are breastfeeding drink it a lot because it's supposed to help with milk supply. And I had never heard of it in any other capacity. And my husband came home with like 2 cases from Sam's Club one day. And I was like, what you doing? But it's actually a type of sports drink, so I've been drinking that. I don't know if that's helping. But I'm telling you, man, I'm getting my 1,000 milligrams of calcium. I've got my prenatal that has all the zinc and iron and magnesium in it. It's got vitamin D in it. My calcium has vitamin D. I'm taking an extra vitamin D, and I'm still somehow vitamin D deficient, even though I go outside and sit in the sun for 2 hours every day, and I'm eating like tons of cheese and yogurt and drinking fortified orange juice. So I don't know, man, but it's a thing that happens. I mean, I will say I drink bone broth every day for the calcium, and I did that even pre-pregnancy. And so far, I don't have any stretch marks. And you guys might think that it might be early for stretch marks, but like, I'm going to show you this, you guys. This is somehow 18 weeks tomorrow. This big ass bump is only 18 weeks. To the point where people are asking me if I'm having twins or if I'm sure about my due date. I am not having twins, and I am sure about my due date. I was calculating that shit down to the T. So yeah, I think it's just because I'm a small person. There's not a lot of extra room in there, but no stretch marks or anything so far, so that's good. Extra side effects? I don't know, because I'm still really exhausted. Actually, I will say some extra side effects. I don't know if it's the fish oil. I don't know what it is, but my cholesterol. Someone's saying, "Oh, like, watch out for the cholesterol in dairy." My cholesterol has actually gone down, so that's cool, I guess. Babe's giving me lower cholesterol. Q says, anyone on the internet could say they are being spied on by NSA and would be correct. They may not be targeted, but everyone is watched and recorded. Indeed. And see, now even in the chat, everyone's like, damn, are you sure it's not twins or triplets? I am very, very sure. In fact, I have not, I'm with midwives, so they don't have, they don't do a ton of ultrasounds because, I don't know, there's some contraindications against it. Let me make sure there's no personal information on this. But this was back from May. Clearly, there is only one in there. And there's only one heartbeat in there, so there's only one. Ringin Constitutional says, keep up the great work. Leonidas, remember to lay off the seafood while you're housing Liberty Baby Doll. Mercury, you know. Yes, actually, every single day pre-pregnancy for lunch, I had a big salad with tuna salad on top of it. And now that I can't eat that, like, I struggle with lunch every day and figuring out what to eat. Also, not being able to eat sushi really sucks. I found out the day of the philosopher meet and greet in Florida. And that morning we went out to breakfast, brunch, whatever, with philosopher and with Jack. And I ordered an omelet that had alligator in it. And after I ordered it, I was like, oh shit. And I was like Googling whether or not alligator was pregnancy safe. I do that with like everything, but I was really prepared, and I had already read a book like months ago on the do's and don'ts and things to eat and not to eat. So I like check any kind of seafood and what type it is to see if it's safe before that. So no worries. Trust me, I know many, many things. My doctors so far have been actually impressed with how much information. They're like, oh, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, yes, I know. The only one that was not impressed was, and I'll tell you this little fun fact. I almost put this in the Liberty Minute video, but then I decided against it because, like, I don't know. When I saw my new primary care doctor, I have never, ever met her before, and she tried to tell me that I absolutely need to get the COVID shot because if I don't get the COVID shot, I'm going to get COVID and have preterm labor and kill my baby. As if it was 100% statistical fact and there was no other possible outcome that could occur from not getting the COVID vaccine. And yet it's the folks that are hesitating on getting the vaccine because of a lack of long-term data that are the conspiracy theorists and fear-mongers with misinformation. Yeah. Thanks, lady. Steve Pat says, China is clearly the bigger threat. Why is Russia always the scapegoat? Because we're friends. Well, friends. Biden is friends with China. I don't know. Because maybe they're a bigger threat of a world power, and so we're trying to be more friendly with them. I don't know, man. China is clearly a threat and has been a threat for quite some time. And I'm sorry that I don't have an article to pull up right away for this for you guys, but it even just got found out through satellite imaging that China is building more of a nuclear arsenal and they're building more nuclear silos. This is kind of a big deal. They are sending troops to get ready to like invade Taiwan. Kind of a big deal, but you know, it's always about placating China. Jesse Meek says, just wanted to take a moment to say hi to all the Alphabet agents watching this now. Please take a moment to go freshen up your coffee and don't forget the arsenic creamer. Just kidding. Don't punish LG just because you're, or LD just because you're star. That is not, just for the record, YouTube and NSA. That is not me threatening violence in any way. And Jesse's clearly joking. Don't nuke us, please. Ringin' Constitutional says, well said, Jesse. F the clowns. Gardner says, hi, LD. Thank you hugely for covering the privacy issue and being so principled. Love you, woman. Well, thank you, Gardner. Thank you. Let's see. Oh, yeah. And apparently Trump has a new social media app called like Grifter. I don't know anything about it, but I see people talking about it in the chat. Jesse also says, LD is just a tiny lady. I have a photo of her and Fo standing next to me, and I'm not a tall guy, but I am several inches taller. Yes, I am. I'm a small little human being. Robert Graham says, damn, that's not a bun in the oven. That's more like a loaf of bread. Yeah. Oh, and my aunt is here, and she says, oh, baby bump. Yeah, it's a big bump. I was starting to show at like, I don't know, like 12 weeks, and everyone at the time was like, no, that's just bloat. That's just bloat. Well, it's getting bigger, so it's not just bloat. All right, so let's get to the Trump story really quick. So while all of this is going on, and because someone mentioned Trump as well and his new like social media thing, so there's like a couple different steps in this story. The first being that Trump has announced that he is suing big tech, or attempting to sue big tech. There's lots of articles out recently talking about like, oh, how they think that it's just a publicity stunt. None of this is going to stick. I mean, that's entirely possible. Any sort of lawsuit, kind of what it is you drag in anyone and everyone you can on any possible charge that you possibly can and throw it all at the wall to see what sticks. That's kind of what I think is going on here. So this is also from Axios. I like Axios because it's short and sweet, and they get down to the facts. So from Axios, former President Donald Trump, who has complained about censorship by social media giants, filed class action lawsuits Wednesday against Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg, Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey, and Google CEO, I don't know how to pronounce this one, Sundar Pichai? I'm guessing. Yeah, we'll go with that. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing it. They say that it matters because it's the latest escalation in Trump's years-long battle with Twitter and Facebook over free speech and censorship. Trump is completely banned from Twitter and is banned from Facebook for another 2 years. I didn't even know it was that long. So he announced this on Wednesday at an 11 a.m. press conference that he is the lead class representative in a lawsuit being filed with the Southern District of Florida. I think it might be pertinent that it's being filed in Florida as well, because Florida, I don't remember if it's passed or not, but they were trying to get that law, executive order, whatever, in place that social media companies cannot kick people off of their platforms if they are running for office or something like that. And if they do, then they can be sued by the state of Florida. So it might be pertinent that this is being filed in Florida. The filing, Trump said, seeks immediate injunctive relief to allow the prompt restoration of his social media accounts. He also said he is asking the court to impose punitive damages on the 3 social media giants. Trump's legal effort is supported by the America First Policy Institute, a nonprofit focused on perpetuating Trump's policies through a new legal entity called the Constitutional Litigation Partnership. The president and CEO, Brooke Rollins, and board chair Linda McMahon, both former Trump officials, accompanied him during the announcements. So the class action lawsuit would enable Trump to sue the tech CEOs on behalf of a broader group of people who he argues have been censored by biased policies. So far, Facebook and Twitter have declined to comment. To date, Trump and other conservative critics have not presented any substantial evidence that either platform I can't even say this with a straight face, is biased against conservatives in its policies or implementation of them. Wasn't there some sort of like study or something that came out about that? And hasn't there been whistleblowers from both Twitter and Facebook about the terms of service and the way that they're moderated and unfairly targeting conservative politics? Isn't that a thing that's happened a couple times? I mean, I guess this is accurate in that Trump hasn't presented that, but I'm pretty sure that's been a thing. I think that was even one of the topics of some Project Veritas videos as well. So it's out there on the internet, and the internet is forever, apparently, except for Trump's social media accounts. And they're saying that this is a big deal because it has significantly, downplayed Trump's reach. The former president and his allies have repeatedly criticized the bans as censorship. Facebook and Twitter say that it isn't censorship, and they had an oversight board, an independent oversight board, go through it and look at it and affirmed the decision because of possibly violent speech and saying that it wasn't safe to have Trump on their platforms because of January 6th. We've talked about that before, and we even had where Trump spoke at CPAC, and it was nearly impossible to find the whole speech anywhere, and it was buried on the YouTube search results and was actually throttled for quite some time until there was an article that came out about it, and then it popped back up on the search results. We remember that. I did a video on that. And they're kind of saying that, like, oh, this is just what Trump does. He tries to sue people and fails, so it's not really going to work. But they do point out that lawsuits and actions targeting big tech platforms serve as ammunition for Trump's conservative base, and down ballot Republican candidates have latched onto messages around censorship as part of their campaigns and messaging tactics. And of course, there was an article that, let's see if I can find it, that now they're saying, at least one outlet is saying that, oh, he's only doing it to fundraise, and that's the only reason that he's even trying to do any of these lawsuits is to get himself attention for future runs and future donations. And of course, now that article is not popping up in my saved articles, which is funny. But we do have the Daily Wire is weighing in as Trump made a op-ed. He wrote an op-ed for the Wall Street Journal. Wall Street Journal is behind a paywall, so we can't access that directly on air without some finagling. But the Daily Wire reported on it. If they can do it to me, they can do it to you. Donald Trump pens Wall Street Journal op-ed on why I'm suing big tech. So on Thursday, this was published. One of the things that he wrote is, one of the gravest threats to our democracy today is a powerful group of big tech corporations that have teamed up with the government to censor the free speech of the American people. This is not only wrong, but it is unconstitutional. So he is saying that he is suing big tech to restore free speech for himself and for every American. And he also argued that social media has become as central to free speech as town meeting halls, newspapers, and television networks were in prior generations, and that the internet is the new public square, which is not wrong. That's also something that we've talked about on the channel, and that is one of the popular arguments. With big tech companies like Facebook and Twitter and Google, we do get into a funky gray area because they are private companies, but they are private companies that work directly with the government to implement government policies and directives, and they directly influence the government. Last week, I believe it was, we talked about the ratio and percentages of the folks on Twitter and how the loudest folks on Twitter only represent like 2 or 3% of the American population as far as politics, but because they are the loudest on social media, they are the ones that get to influence public policy a lot more than the average American. And so we're really getting this unequal representation and this unequal implementation in public policy because of things like Twitter and Facebook. We also have Facebook. Last week, we also talked about how everyone was getting the warnings about like, oh, you might have been exposed to extremist content. Oh, are you worried that a friend is becoming an extremist? And remember how we talked about that was part of Facebook saying, well, everyone says that we were responsible for not stopping January 6th, so we have to do something. And at the same time, Joe Biden's administration has come out and said that they are going to create, quote unquote, new pathways for folks to report friends and family members and neighbors, whoever, to the government if they believe they have been radicalized. And the White House officials have said they will be using big tech to help them accomplish that and create those pathways. So when we talk about things like Facebook and Google and Twitter being private companies, there is this really strange area there because Trump is right. They have become the town square, essentially the modern day town square, but they are acting directly with government and helping the government implement these programs and these policies. So how much of a private company are they when they are working directly with government in their domestic terrorism programs, for example, when they are directly influencing search results to promote Hillary Clinton, as happened in the 2016 election? And that is stuff that came out. That information ended up being leaked. There were whistleblowers on that. We know that that was a thing. We know that Facebook and Twitter and Google have engaged in all of these government programs, have heavily tried to influence the public narrative. The whole article that we had from Time magazine about the quote-unquote secret cabal and how Mark Zuckerberg himself donated to that effort. And it says right in there that all of these people got together with big tech to influence public opinion and control the flow of information. If that stuff is happening, how much can we really call Google and Twitter and Facebook a private company that has the right to censor people off of their platform? It's a really big and important question. And I don't think that there is necessarily a cut and dry single argument for this because it can be seen from multiple lenses in multiple ways. But I do think that these big tech companies have gotten past the point of having the luxury of being able to say, well, I'm a private company, so I can, kick off Laura Loomer while she's running for office because I don't like her politics, for example. I don't think that they should be able to do that at this point because they have become so integral to the public discourse and the implementation of government policies. That's just the way that it is. And he talks about in the op-ed here, Trump continues talking about The way that big tech and social media have wielded their power and utilizing that to, quote, manipulate and control the political debate itself. I mean, he's not wrong. I don't know if he actually wrote this himself or if he dictated it and someone else wrote it down and made it look pretty, but he's not wrong. He is not wrong at all. He gives various examples in this op-ed of big tech censorship, everything from like COVID-19 to the Hunter Biden story, which is another excellent example of how much that was buried. And it could have possibly affected the election because that's a really big deal. And it's interesting because now there's this whole big hullabaloo around Hunter Biden and his artwork and how Joe Biden and the White House have crafted some deal so that the buyers of his artwork can remain secret and don't have to have transparency. And there have been some theories put forth by even legacy media at this point that it would be a way for the Bidens to accept bribes, which is kind of a big deal. They're talking about it now after Biden is already in the White House. It was completely buried when the story first broke. Remember, it was a big deal because the only place you could hear about it was from small YouTubers like myself on YouTube, on BitChute, Rumble, places like that. You could not hear about this anywhere else, and it took a lot of digging. It was like here in the New York Post. That was it. So, I mean, that's another good point as far as censorship and the argument that these tech Goliaths have gone past the point of being private companies. And then, he talks about, Chinese propaganda, Iranian dictator, and how they're allowed to spread threats and lies on the platforms, and they don't get taken off, blah, blah, blah. I mean, this is all, he's basically repeating stuff that we know and we have already talked about before. And of course, experts say like, oh, it's dead on arrival. It's a big media stunt. Experts say the social media lawsuits are likely doomed, blah, blah, blah. I mean, and maybe that's the case, but I mean, I suppose that it's worth trying. Again, it says the lawsuits are filed in Florida. In addition, they claim that many such platforms could and should be considered as state actors who should be limited by First Amendment restrictions on government limitations on free speech, and the lawsuits look to strike down Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, as well as seeking unspecified punitive damages. But one expert says that this is going absolutely nowhere. First, courts have repeatedly rejected the claim that social media censorship of any form violates the First Amendment. The basic reason for this is that big tech giants are private entities and not government actors, and so they do not fall under the First Amendment of the Constitution, because the Constitution would require them to be state actors. According to this person, it says the accusations are illogical. And it goes on to discuss why they can't be considered state agents or state actors. Second, the attempt to strike down Section 230 as unconstitutional is somewhat bizarre, given that Trump incorrectly justified the lawsuits against big tech by referring to Section 230, claiming that once they got Section 230, they're not private companies. In reality, Section 230 has nothing to do with whether or not a company is private. The legislation was passed into law as part of the Communications Decency Act of 1996 and regulates internet content. Specifically, it was drafted to regulate online P-word that I'm not allowed to say on YouTube by providing website publishers with immunity from prosecution over third-party content placed on their website. And then it goes into an further explanation of 230 and why these lawsuits won't stick. But, I mean, if nothing else, it is bringing attention to the fact that there's, what is it called? Grifter? This new social media thing? I don't know. I can't actually find it. But I know that people have been posting about it in the chat. I did see some headline earlier saying that people were very skeptical about it and that they don't think that it's going to get any traction because even conservatives are skeptical of it and how it claims to be for free speech. I would be interested to see how exactly it's being backed and like the server setup and all of that, because we saw Parler, and as soon as Trump said he was going to go over to Parler and we got all of these new users, it got nuked completely. Google nuked it, the Apple iStore nuked it, and then Amazon nuked the servers. And it's back, but then not, but then back, but then not, and it's never going to get the traction that it once had ever again. And the claim with that was that people were using it to organize violence for January 6th. It came out in the end that that was not true. Facebook was the primary tool for that, and there was a total of like 6 posts on the entire website that were moderated and removed, I believe, by the folks over at Parler at Google's request and Amazon's request. And still, they were nuked anyways. If Trump indeed has started this new social media app and doesn't have all his ducks in a row with it, the same thing's going to happen again, especially if it's being run or backed by Trump, because they're definitely going to claim there's extremist content on it or calls for violence or something, because that is the whole reason they used to take Trump off of social media in the first place. So right now, it's not something that I'm going to run out and join. I don't have a lot of confidence in it, unfortunately. This is another story where we're just going to have to see where time takes us and what happens with these lawsuits, if anything. Again, it's possible that they are dead on arrival because the lawyers just didn't do a good job with the wording or filing them properly, or, because of political underpinnings. Quite frankly, that is unfortunately a modern day reality, that sometimes it's just politics that get in the way. All right, I know that some other super chats came in, so let's see that. Q says if you see a flash, duck and cover. I mean, it could be fireworks. That could be the reason for a flash, though it's not dark enough for them yet. Alien Probe Victim says, congrats, LD. I haven't been able to come on here and say that till now. Well, thank you. I might do like a channel-wide video at some point, but then maybe not. I don't know, because I already like posted it in the YouTube feed. I'm still getting the new channel together. I actually ended up changing the name of it. You guys convinced me. You guys were saying Liberty Mama, and so I'm calling it Liberty Mama, and that's what we're going with. And so I redid all the graphics for that, and I have a couple videos edited. I just haven't posted them yet because I have to figure out the little intro thing, but maybe I'll do a video about that, releasing that. I don't know. We'll see. Wow, Mark Fallos. My goodness. Thank you, sir, for the very generous donation. Wow, you guys, that's pretty amazing. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mark. And Aaron Miller, thank you as well for the donation. Jesse Meek says, what the F are they still harping on January 6th for? Just watch the damn footage. Nobody stormed anything. The cops moved aside barricades, gestured for people to come forward, and all but handed out pamphlets at the door. Basically, but wasn't it like the Democrats wanted to form that 9/11 style commission to investigate it, and it didn't pass the Senate, so now they're like doing their own thing with it or something? Like, I don't know. I saw some other crazy headline earlier today where like the Democrats are like, we're doing God's work. Like that's just gross to like bring religion into it and say that you're doing God's work. I don't know, man. Crazy stuff. Crazy stuff. Oh goodness, it's 8:30, so let me just scroll through and make sure that I did get everybody, because, you know, I feel bad when I go back after the fact and see that I missed one. All right, it looks like I did get all of these super chats. Cool. Huh. Michael J says your baby bump is the only thumbnail you need for the new channel. Yeah, a friend of mine was like, oh, you should do like a little cartoon like you have for your current logo, but it's like a baby bump. And I'm like, maybe. Maybe. We'll see. CNB Motorworks LLC says January 6th deal is just more political theater. Yeah, I mean, that's really what it's come down to at this point. Everything is virtue signaling and political theater. And I think it has been that way for some time anyways, but it's getting more and more obvious. Like, as you know, a libertarian, the moment I became aware of the shady underpinnings of government in like 2010, 2011, I was like, all of this is political theater and it's just a clown show. But it's gotten more and more obvious that more and more people are seeing behind the curtain, and there's that whole like clown world meme. That's because it's so ridiculous and so out of control at this point that like everyday normie citizens are recognizing it. And that's when you know that it's bad. But so that is it for today, because it is 8:30. Oh, and the Mad Mechanic says, are you having a contest for baby names? We already have a name. We have actually had a name for like 5 or 6 years. So we're going with the name that we already have, but maybe someday in the future, maybe I'll have a poll for baby number 2. Because it's probably going to end up being a girl again, because there's lots of sisters and aunts and female cousins in my husband's family. So if we have another girl after this one, then maybe I'll do that for baby number 2. But everyone have a good night. Thanks for everyone in the super chat. Thanks or in the chat. Thank you also for the generous super chats. I strung that together accidentally. Thank you to the mods. Thank you for everyone that does the likes and the shares. Thank you to the folks over on Patreon and Subscribestar and your support. Thanks to anyone who uses the links in the description, the partners to help support that channel, and one last super chat from Brad the Magnificent says, so the government is telling the truth about the spying program that they lied about when they said they didn't have it. Basically, yes. That is the sum of the Tucker Carlson story at this point. I do have a regular non-Liberty Minute video written out. It just needs a few final tweaks before I record it, so maybe that will be something up soon. I'm not going to tell you when it'll be up, because every time I say it'll be up by the weekend, the end of the weekend, then something happens and I don't release it in time, and then I feel silly and ridiculous for telling you guys when I was going to release it and then not doing it on time. So it'll be up at some point. It will exist. It is in writing. It will happen at some point. Keep an eye out for that. Otherwise, thanks for everyone for tuning in. Have a good weekend. Stay safe, etc., etc. And I will see you on the next stream or the next video. Good night, guys.